Please like, share, and subscribe. Wishing you happiness and good luck every day.
So, what if I told you that the best way to win in business is to stop competing altogether? It sounds crazy, right? But that's the powerful idea behind something called Blue Ocean Strategy. We're going to dive into how it works, and it's all about the shift from fighting with your rivals to creating brand new markets that make the competition, well, simply irrelevant.
You see this quote, "Help, my ocean is turning red." It comes right from the book, and you know what? It perfectly captures a feeling that so many business leaders have. It's that sinking feeling of being trapped in a super crowded market, fighting for smaller and smaller pieces of the pie, where the water is just bloody from all the fighting.
So what exactly is a red ocean? Well, it's basically the market space we all know. It's where every company is trying to outperform the other guy to get a bigger share of the customers that are already there. And as that space gets more and more crowded, what happens? Profits shrink, products start to look the same, and the competition just gets, well, you get the idea. It's a total bloodbath. But what if you could just escape all that? It's a huge question. If you feel like you're in a market that's shrinking, where everyone's just fighting over the same people, how do you do more than just survive? How do you actually win? Well, let's take a look at a company that was in a dying industry and didn't just survive, they completely took off. And that amazing escape was pulled off by Cirque du Soleil. Now here's the key. They didn't try to build a slightly better circus in an industry that was already fading. No way. They totally reinvented what a circus could even be. And you really have to get how bad this industry was. I mean, from a business standpoint, it looked like a total dead end. Audiences were getting smaller every year. People were getting more and more concerned about animal welfare, and honestly, kids would rather play video games. The big circuses set the rules, and all the smaller ones could do was offer a cheaper, watered-down version of the same old thing. And here is the absolute game-changing shift in thinking. Cirque du Soleil didn't chase the traditional circus audience, families with young kids. Instead, they created something brand new that appealed to a totally different group, adults and corporate clients. These were people who would normally go to the theater or the opera, and they were willing to pay a much higher price for a unique experience.
What's so brilliant is how they did it. It was really systematic. They didn't just add new stuff. They were ruthless about getting rid of old, expensive things. They completely eliminated the costly animal shows and star performers. They reduced some of the classic circus acts, but then they raised things like the quality of the venue and the sophistication of the humor. And most importantly, they created things the circus world had never seen, stuff they borrowed from theater, like a real theme, artistic music and dance, and having multiple shows running at once.
So, Cirque du Soleil's amazing story gives us the perfect way to understand this whole theory. Let's break down the two types of market universes, red oceans and blue oceans. Okay, so red oceans. That's pretty much everything we know, right? Every industry that exists today. The rules of the game are already defined, the boundaries are all set, and the main goal is just to beat your rivals and grab more of the market that's already there. It's a tough, zero-sum game. But blue oceans, this is the exciting part. This is the unknown. It's all the industries that don't even exist yet. This is about creating brand new demand, not fighting over the old stuff. In a blue ocean, who your competitors are doesn't really matter, because you've created a space that no one else is even in. You're the one making the rules. And this table just lays it all out so clearly. Red ocean strategy is all about competing in the space you have. It's about playing the existing game better than anyone else. Blue ocean strategy, it's about creating a whole new game. You're not just trying to be better, you're trying to be the only one. So the big question is, how do you actually do this? How do you create a blue ocean? Well, the engine that drives this whole thing is a really powerful idea the authors call value innovation. Value innovation isn't just about coming up with a cool new invention, and it's not just about adding more features. It's about a fundamental alignment. It's about linking that innovation to what your customers truly value, at a price they're happy to pay, and at a cost that makes sense for your company. It's the sweet spot where all those things come together. And this is a huge deal because it completely shatters one of the oldest rules in the business playbook, the idea that you have to choose between value and cost. Conventional wisdom says you can either be a high-end brand with high costs, or you can be a low-cost option with so-so value. Value innovation says, nope, you can and you must do both.
So you lower your costs by eliminating and reducing the things your industry has always competed on, but customers don't really care that much about anymore, like the expensive animal acts for Cirque du Soleil. At the exact same time, you boost the value for your buyers by raising and creating brand new things the industry has never offered, like that sophisticated storyline. It's about achieving low cost and high differentiation at the same time. Okay, so this all sounds really good in theory, but does it actually pan out in the real world? Why should a company take the risk of sailing into these uncharted blue waters? Well, the data is pretty jaw-dropping. So the authors of the book did their homework. They analyzed 108 different business launches to see what kind of impact these different strategies had on revenue and, more importantly, on profit. And here it is. This is the big aha moment. Just look at this. A massive 86% of all the business launches they studied were red ocean moves, incremental improvements, line extensions. But get this, all that effort only accounted for 39% of the total profits. Now look at the blue ocean launches. They were only 14% of the total launches, a tiny fraction, but they generated a staggering 61% of all profits. Let that sink in for a second. That is just incredible. So the crucial point here is pretty clear, right? The vast majority of companies are burning all their energy and resources fighting it out in these bloody red oceans for a shrinking share of the profits. But the real opportunity, the outsized returns, and the game-changing growth, all of that comes from creating blue oceans. And that leaves us with one final big question to think about. What could happen in your industry, in your company, maybe even in your own career, if you just shifted your focus a little? What if you stopped trying to beat the competition at their own game and instead started creating a new one that made them just irrelevant? The data shows that's where the real rewards are hiding. So what's your blue ocean? Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful idea, one that basically flips everything you think you know about business strategy on its head. It argues that winning isn't about fighting harder. It's about changing the entire game. And that's the core of blue ocean strategy. So let's just start with the most basic question. How do you win in business? For decades, the answer seemed pretty simple, right? You build a better mousetrap, you market it harder, and you just crush your rivals. But what if that whole way of thinking is just wrong? This quote right here, it gets to the very heart of what we're talking about. It sounds like a total paradox, doesn't it? But stick with me, because it's the exact principle that let one company do what almost everyone thought was impossible. To really get this, we've got to talk about our main example, Cirque du Soleil. I mean, how on earth did a troupe of Canadian street performers manage to build a global entertainment empire in an industry that everybody else thought was on its last legs? Just look at the speed here. The undisputed king of the circus world, Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey, took over a century to get to its peak revenue. Cirque du Soleil, they blew right past that number in less than 20 years. It's staggering. So what was their secret? Well, to really appreciate how incredible this was, you have to understand the world they walked into. From a business perspective, the circus industry was, well, it was a mess. Seriously, it was the last place you'd ever expect to find this kind of explosive growth. I mean, just look at this situation. Audiences were shrinking because kids would rather play video games. The cost of hiring star performers was skyrocketing. Animal rights groups were putting on more and more pressure, and the circuses that were left, they were just in this brutal, cutthroat fight over a smaller and smaller piece of the pie. It was a bloody battle for survival. And that bloody battle is a perfect example of what the authors of this strategy call a red ocean. But here's the thing. Cirque du Soleil wasn't interested in that fight. They were looking for something completely different. So red oceans, that's the known market space. Think of any established industry. Cars, smartphones, you name it. The rules are set, everybody knows who the players are, and the competition is so fierce it turns the water red with blood. Blue oceans, though, are the total opposite. They are untapped markets where demand is created, not fought over. And this is the key to the whole thing. Cirque du Soleil didn't win by trying to get kids to come to their circus instead of someone else's. They totally ignored that battle. Instead, they created a brand new market of adults and corporate clients, people who would have never considered going to a circus before, but were happy to pay top-dollar, theater-level prices for a completely new kind of experience.
This chart really breaks it down. In a red ocean, you're competing in the space that already exists. In a blue ocean, you're making new space. You're trying to bait the competition versus making them totally irrelevant. But the biggest difference is right there at the bottom. Red oceans force you to choose between offering more value or having a lower cost. Blue oceans show you how to get both at the same time.
So how in the world do you do that? How do you get high value and low cost? The engine that makes this all possible is a concept called value innovation. Now, value innovation isn't just about making small improvements here and there. It's about a massive leap in value for your customers that, and this is the magic part, also lowers your costs. It's that perfect sweet spot where what's good for the customer is also amazing for the company. This idea completely shatters one of the oldest rules in the book. This idea that you always have to make a choice, a trade-off, between value and cost. You know the traditional thinking, right? It's always been, you can be a premium brand and offer amazing value, but it's going to cost you more. Or you can be a budget brand with decent value at a low cost. You have to pick a lane. Value innovation just says, nope, you don't have to choose. The goal is to drive your costs down, while at the very same time you're pushing buyer value up. You're creating a whole new curve. And Cirque du Soleil is the perfect example of how this works in the real world.
So let's break down how they did it. They used a simple framework that asked 4 questions. First, what industry factors could be completely eliminated? And they were ruthless. They got rid of the most expensive things, the costly and controversial animal acts, the high-priced star performers, and those chaotic 3-ring venues.
At the same time, they asked what could be raised way above the industry standard or created from scratch. This is where they jacked up the value. They brought in elements from the theater, a theme, a real storyline, sophisticated music, and artistic dance. They basically invented a whole new category of live entertainment.
So what you ended up with was this incredible hybrid. It had the thrill and fun of the circus, but it also had the artistic depth and sophistication of the theater. It wasn't just a better circus. It was something else entirely, floating all by itself in its own beautiful blue ocean. Now, this is a fantastic story, but you might be thinking, is this just a one-off, a lucky fluke? Well, the research behind this strategy says absolutely not. This isn't an anomaly. It's a repeatable pattern. This data just says it all. A huge study of business launches found that the vast majority, 86% of them, were just small improvements in existing red oceans, and they only brought in 39% of the profits. Meanwhile, that tiny 14% of launches that created blue oceans, they generated a whopping 61% of total profits. The payoff for being bold and creating new space is just enormous. So, it all comes down to this one fundamental shift in your thinking. Stop obsessing over your competitors. Stop benchmarking them. Stop trying to beat them at their own game. Instead, your goal should be to create such a massive leap in value for your buyers that the competition just becomes irrelevant. And that leaves us with one last question for you to think about. Whether it's in your business, your career, or even a personal project, the world is absolutely full of crowded red oceans. The real opportunity, the real breakthrough might be in finding that open blue water. So where could you stop fighting over what already exists and start creating something entirely new?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are diving into a really powerful idea called blue ocean strategy. Think of it as a playbook for making your competition, well, completely irrelevant by creating brand new markets from scratch.
So let me just ask you this, right off the bat. Is your business stuck in this brutal, day-to-day fight just to survive? Or is it out there building a whole new world where it can actually thrive? That question, right there, is really at the heart of everything we're about to explore.
All right, let's make this real. We're going to ground this in a real-world example. I want you to picture the U.S. wine industry right around the year 2000. Seriously, if you were looking for a market that was just bloody with competition, what strategists call a red ocean, this was it. A perfect storm.
I mean, just look at this. It's a brutal picture. You've got this huge $20 billion market, but thousands of wineries are all duking it out for the same unchanging group of customers. This created this huge consolidation, these epic battles for shelf space in grocery stores, and this constant race to the bottom on price. It was a bloody zero-sum game.
So, how in the world do you even begin to make sense of a market that's that chaotic? Well, you need a map. And in the world of strategy, that map is called the strategy canvas. It's a really simple but powerful tool that helps you see in one snapshot exactly where everyone in an industry is placing their bets. Let's take a look at one. So this is the strategy canvas for that US wine industry we were just talking about. Along the bottom, that horizontal axis, you can see all the different things the industry was competing on. You know, stuff like price, how much they spent on marketing, the prestige of the vineyard, that sort of thing.
In this, right here, this illustrates the problem perfectly. Take a look at those two lines, what they call value curves. One is for the fancy premium wines, and the other is for the budget wines. Notice something? They have the exact same shape. Everybody was competing on the exact same stuff, just offering a little more or a little less of it. To the customer, it all just looked the same, but with different price tags.
And this brings us to the crucial insight. To escape that bloody red ocean, you can't just try to be a little bit better than your competitors. That is a losing game. You have to totally reframe the problem. You've got to shift your focus from your competitors to alternatives, and from your current customers to non-customers. You know, the people who aren't buying from anyone in your industry at all. So that's the billion-dollar question, right? If everybody else in your industry is zigging, how do you find a way to zag? How do you actually build a radically different value curve, something totally new? Well, you do it with this tool. This is the 4 actions framework, and it is the engine that actually creates a blue ocean strategy. It's basically a set of 4 simple but incredibly powerful questions that are designed to challenge all the baked-in assumptions of an industry. Okay, let's walk through them real quick. First, what things that the industry just completely takes for granted can you eliminate? Just get rid of them. Second, what factors can you reduce way below the industry standard? Third, what things should you raise far above what everyone else is doing? And finally, the most exciting one, what can you create that the industry has never ever offered before? And this brings us to the hero of our story, an Australian company called Casella Wines. Now, instead of trying to fight the thousands of other wineries, they asked a totally different question. They looked at the non-customers, you know, people who drank beer and cocktails, and they asked, how can we make a wine that's actually fun and easy for them to drink? And this is what they created. This is the strategy canvas for their wine, called Yellowtail. Just look at that thing. Their value curve isn't just a little bit different, it looks like it's from a completely different planet. It diverges so dramatically from both the budget and the premium wines. They didn't just bend the rules, they broke them all. So that's the what, a totally new, radically different strategy. Now let's connect it back to the how. How did they actually use that 4 actions framework to pull this off?
They use this grid. It's a simple way of organizing their answers to those 4 big questions. So let's break down exactly what they did quadrant by quadrant.
Honestly, this is just genius. On one side, look at what they cut out. They eliminated all the intimidating wine terminology and the whole idea that wine needs to be aged. Then they reduced the wine's complexity, the number of choices, and all the talk about vineyard prestige. This saved them a ton of money. And then with the money they saved, they reinvested. They raised the price just above the cheap budget wines to signal it was still good quality. And here's the magic. They created 3 brand new things customers valued. Easy drinking to appeal to people who didn't like traditional wine, ease of selection with a simple eye-catching label, and a sense of fun and adventure that just stripped away all the pretension.
So, did it actually work? Oh, you better believe it. Within just a decade, 2.5 million glasses of Yellowtail were being enjoyed every single day around the world. And here's the most important part. They didn't just steal customers from other wineries. They grew the entire market by bringing all those beer and cocktail drinkers into the fold.
The Yellowtail story is absolutely incredible, but it's not a one-off fluke. It actually reveals a repeatable blueprint. It turns out that every great blue ocean strategy, when you look at it, shares 3 really clear characteristics.
And here they are. Number 1, focus. The strategy hones in on just a few key factors instead of trying to be amazing at everything. Number 2, divergence. Just like we saw, the shape of its value curve looks radically different from everybody else. And number 3, a compelling tagline. The strategy is so clear and simple you can explain it in a single powerful sentence.
And once you know what to look for, you see this pattern everywhere. Southwest Airlines? They didn't compete with other airlines. They saw themselves as an alternative to driving a car. Cirque du Soleil? They didn't try to make a better circus with more animals. They created a whole new kind of entertainment, this beautiful blend of circus and theater. In both cases, you see that same intense focus and that same radical divergence. So here's the thing.
This isn't just some interesting theory for a business school class. This strategy canvas is a practical tool that you can actually use to diagnose your own industry and start seeing opportunities that literally no one else is seeing. So I want you to think about your own industry for a second. If you were to map out its strategy canvas, would your company's value curve look pretty much the same as everyone else's? Are you all just fighting over the same things day in and day out?
This table is a great little diagnostic tool. You know, if all the curves are converging, yep, you're stuck in a red ocean. If your company's trying to score high on everything, you're probably overspending on things your customers don't even care about. And if your strategy is full of weird industry jargon, that's a huge warning sign that you're focused on yourselves, not on the customer.
And I want to leave you with this really powerful idea that kind of flips the whole concept of innovation on its head. We tend to think of this kind of big move as a huge, risky gamble. But the creators of Blue Ocean Strategy argue the exact opposite. They say that using these tools to systematically create new value is actually about minimizing risk, not taking it.
So as we wrap things up here, I'll just leave you with this to think about. What red ocean are you swimming in right now? And maybe more importantly, what uncontested blue ocean is out there, just waiting for you to create it? You know that feeling in business, like you're in this constant brutal fight, just battling it out day after day over the same small piece of the pie? Well, what if there was a way to just escape that fight entirely? Not by being better than your rivals, but by making them completely irrelevant. That's the amazing idea behind the framework we're going to break down today.
So it all boils down to this one big idea. On one side, you have the red ocean. This is where most of us live and work. It's the market space we all know, and it's called the red ocean because the water is bloody from all the sharks, rivals, fighting for the same customers. But on the other side, you've got the blue ocean. This is all the untapped market space, totally free of competition. It's about creating something new in a vast, deep ocean of opportunity. So, here's the big question, right? How do you actually make that jump? How do you stop fighting over the same tiny slice and start creating a whole new pie for yourself? The cool thing is, it's not about some random stroke of genius or waiting for lightning to strike. It's actually a structured way of thinking.
All right, so how do we actually escape this red ocean? Well, you need a map, and the Blue Ocean Strategy gives us exactly that, a framework with 6 clear paths to systematically create these new markets. We're going to walk through 4 of the most powerful ones right now.
So here's a quick roadmap of where we're headed. We've touched on the core idea. Now we're going to dive into how to look across alternatives, find totally new customers, offer a complete solution, and even how to shape future trends. And it all leads to one thing, creating your own blue ocean. Let's jump into the first path, looking across alternative industries. This is all about breaking out of your industry's tunnel vision and asking a simple question. What are the other ways my customers get this job done? And to really get this, let's look at a fascinating puzzle. NetJets, the company that basically invented the fractional jet ownership market. So how on earth did they end up becoming bigger than many actual airlines? Well, the secret wasn't in looking at their competitors, but at the alternatives their customers were stuck with. So back then, if you were a corporate traveler, you basically had 2 choices. You could fly commercial, which was, relatively cheap, but it came with all the headaches, the lines, the layovers, the delays. Or your company could shell out millions of dollars to buy a private jet. Incredibly fast and convenient, sure, but the price tag was just staggering. It was a classic either-or situation. And this is where it gets really brilliant. NetJets didn't try to be a slightly cheaper private jet company or a slightly fancier airline. No, they cherry-picked the best of both worlds. They gave you all the speed and convenience of a private jet, but they completely eliminated that massive cost of ownership. They created fractional ownership, which feels like having your own jet, but at a price point that was way closer to a first-class ticket. Boom! They made the competition totally irrelevant. All right, so just like NetJets looked outside its own industry, our next path is all about looking beyond who you think your customer is. Most industries get laser-focused on one target buyer, but are they really the only one that matters? See, in pretty much any sale, you've got this chain of buyers. You've got the influencers who might recommend something, you've got the purchasers who actually cut the check, and then you have the users, the people who have to live with the product every day. And what happens is entire industries get fixated on just one link in that chain, and they miss massive opportunities. A perfect example is the insulin industry. For decades, every single company was obsessed with the doctors, the influencers. They just kept competing to make pure and pure insulin because that's what doctors cared about. But then Novo Nordisk came along and looked right past the doctor to the patient.
the actual user. They asked, what's their life like? And the answer was, it's terrible. It's full of hassle and the embarrassment of carrying around vials and needles.
And here's the kicker. By shifting their focus, they saw a completely different problem to solve. Their big idea wasn't better insulin, it was a better way to deliver it. The NovoPen. It was discreet, it was simple, and it took away all that social awkwardness. They weren't just selling a drug anymore, they were selling a better life. And they created a massive blue ocean that they still own today.
Okay, our next path is all about zooming out, way out from just your product. It's about thinking about the whole experience, the total solution your customer's really looking for. What happens before they buy, while they use it, and even after they're done.
This one's a great example. You had the US municipal bus industry. Talk about a classic red ocean. Every company was locked in a death match over one single thing. Who could offer the lowest initial price for a bus? But a company from Hungary called Nabi looked at the bigger picture. They realized a city doesn't just buy a bus, they have to operate it for 12 years or more. And the real cost wasn't that upfront price, it was the lifetime of fuel, maintenance, and repairs.
And what's so wild about this is how Nabi just completely flipped the script. They decided to build their buses out of lightweight fiberglass. Now, this meant their initial purchase price was actually higher than their competitors. Crazy, right? But because the buses didn't rust, were cheaper to fix, and used way less fuel, the total cost for the city over that 12-year lifespan was dramatically lower. They totally redefined value by offering the whole solution.
All right, for the last path we're going to cover, we're looking across time. Now, this isn't about gazing into a crystal ball and predicting the future. It's about spotting a huge, irreversible trend that's already happening, and then asking, how can we shape this trend to create something amazing?
Let's look at the rise of digital music. Back in the late 90s, the writing was on the wall, right? People wanted their music digitally. Services like Napster proved that even break the law to get it. And while the entire music industry was suing its own customers into oblivion, Apple just watched, understood the trend, and got ready to shape it.
So Apple didn't invent the MP3. We all know that. But they're the ones who created the blue ocean. How? They just systematically solved all the biggest headaches. Unlike a CD, you could buy just one song you liked. And unlike illegal downloads, it was legal, the quality was fantastic, and it was super easy to find what you wanted. The value was just overwhelming, and a whole new market was born.
So whether it's NetJets, Novo Nordisk, or Apple, you start to see this incredible pattern emerge, don't you? It's all about making a fundamental shift in how you see the world. It's about rebuilding the rules of the market, not just playing better within the old ones.
And this framework, right here, this is your roadmap. It gives you these systematic ways to find your own blue ocean. So instead of obsessing over your rivals, you look across alternatives. Instead of just serving the same old customers, you redefine who the customer even is. You look at the whole solution and you shape the trends that are already happening. This is your toolkit for getting out of that red ocean.
Ultimately, this whole thing really just boils down to one powerful, super counterintuitive idea. It sounds like a paradox, but it's the absolute heart of this whole strategy. The real goal isn't to win the game that everyone else is playing. It's to invent a brand new game, one where you're the only one who knows the rules.
So, as we wrap up, I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. Look at your own world, your industry, your company, even your own project. Which of these paths could you start to explore? Where are the hidden chances to stop competing and finally start creating?
Strategic planning. We all know it's supposed to be this huge engine for growth, right? But let's be real. How often does it feel like the complete opposite? It can be a process that keeps companies totally stuck, fighting for inches in those crowded, bloodied red oceans. Today, we're diving into a core idea from Blue Ocean Strategy. What happens when you ditch the spreadsheets and focus on one simple drawing to change, well, everything? So I've got to ask you, think about your company's strategy process. Does it feel like you're charting some exciting new course? Or is it more like this endless, soul-crushing exercise that just goes nowhere? If you're nodding along right now, trust me, you are not alone. This is an incredibly common problem. Yeah. This is what most strategic plans end up looking like, isn't it? A massive document just jam-packed with spreadsheets and budgets from every single department, all with their own conflicting goals. It becomes a collection of tactics, not a real unified strategy. And by its very design, a plan like this just keeps you competing on the same old terms as everybody else. It's a classic red ocean move. So what's the alternative? How do you break out of that cycle? Well, instead of getting buried in the numbers, you've got to focus on the big picture.
And the tool for this isn't some 100-page document, it's a drawing, the strategy canvas. This visual approach is really the key to unlocking creativity and actually seeing the path to a blue ocean. To really see how this works in the real world, let's look at a company called European Financial Services, or EFS. Now, these guys were struggling, big time. Their strategy was unclear, nobody was on the same page, and they were bogged down by all this internal fighting. EFS was the perfect candidate for what you might call a visual wake-up call. So, picture this. EFS gathers over 20 of its senior managers in a room for a simple task. In just 90 minutes, draw your current strategy. And the result? It was a complete mess. After a lot of heated debates, the final drawings showed two value curves that were nearly identical to their competitors. You can just see how tangled and totally unfocused they are. This one picture told a story that numbers never could. I mean, it showed that EFS was trying to compete on everything, which meant they had no real focus at all. They couldn't even come up with a compelling tagline for their business. And worse, they found these huge contradictions, like having this award-winning, easy-to-use website that was actually one of the slowest in the entire industry. Ouch. Faced with that visual proof, they couldn't deny it anymore. Their strategy was weak, and the need for change was suddenly staring them right in the face. But that wake-up call was just the first step. The next, and maybe the most critical, was to get out of the office and into the field. They had to see how people were actually using, or more importantly, not using their services. This quote really says it all. You can't rely on secondhand reports from other people. Great strategists, just like great artists, need to see the world for themselves. You have to get out there, you have to observe customers and even non-customers in their own environment to find those true game-changing insights. And wow, what a difference it made. The field research completely overturned their assumptions. See, the managers thought their prized relationship managers were the key to their success, but it turned out customers hated wasting time with them. The one thing customers valued most was something only one manager had even suggested, just getting a speedy confirmation that their transaction went through. They were wasting hours just trying to find out if a payment had been made. Okay, so now they're armed with these powerful, real-world insights. The EFS team went back to the drawing board. But this time, they weren't just mapping the present. They were designing a radically different future. And this just illustrates the transformation so brilliantly. I mean, look at the difference between the before and after strategy. The old one is a tangled mess, just mimicking competitors. But the new one? It's focused, it's different, it's crystal clear. It carves out a completely new and uncontested market space. So how did they achieve this incredible shift? They used what's called the 4 actions framework. This simple grid helped them systematically redesign their value curve by asking 4 key questions about what to change in their industry. Here's exactly what they did. First, they completely eliminated relationship management, a high-cost feature customers didn't even want. Gone. They reduced the reliance on account executives. Then, they raised the standard on the things that actually mattered: ease of use, security, accuracy, and speed. And finally, they created 2 things the industry had never offered before: automatic confirmation and a tracking service for payments. And from this new, focused strategy came a tagline that was impossible to even imagine before. All of a sudden, EFS had a clear and powerful identity. This wasn't just a slogan, it was the promise of their new value curve, and it was a promise they could actually deliver on. Now, this big picture approach doesn't just work for one business. You can actually scale it up to manage an entire corporate portfolio and shift a whole company's trajectory just by asking a simple question. What kinds of businesses do we actually have? First, you have your pioneers. These are your true blue ocean businesses. Their value curves are radically different from the competition, and these are the engines of your future growth. At the other extreme are your settlers. These are the Me Too businesses. You know them. Their value curves are basically identical to the rest of the industry. They might be generating cash today, but they're stuck deep in the red ocean with very little growth potential. And then right in the middle, you have migrators. These businesses offer incremental improvements, a little more for a little less, but they don't fundamentally change the game. They're just sitting there, right on the edge between red and blue oceans. Now, when you plot all of your businesses on a pioneer, migrator, settler map, you get an instant visual of your company's growth potential. A portfolio heavy on settlers is a major danger sign, and this is exactly where EFS started out, as a classic settler. The goal becomes clear as day:
shift the portfolio's center of gravity away from today's settlers and toward tomorrow's pioneers. And that leaves us with one final question. When you look at your own company's portfolio, where are the settlers that are just trying to keep up? And more importantly, where are the pioneers that are going to define your future? You know, most businesses feel like they're locked in this constant, brutal fight with their competitors. But what if the secret to winning wasn't about fighting harder at all? What if it was about making the competition, well, totally irrelevant? Today, we're going to break down a really powerful idea from the book Blue Ocean Strategy that shows you exactly how. Does this feel a little too familiar? Yeah, most industries are stuck in this bloody battle, what the book calls a red ocean. Everyone's just scrapping for a bigger piece of the same pie, and a lot of the time, that pie is actually shrinking. They're all chasing the exact same customers. But there has to be another way, right? Okay, so this is where the big mind shift happens. The old way, the conventional wisdom, tells you to focus on the customers you already have. You slice and dice the market into smaller and smaller segments to try and please everyone. But the blue ocean approach, it flips that completely on its head. It tells you to look out at the huge, untapped ocean of non-customers and find the powerful things they all have in common. To pull this off, you have to learn how to reach beyond your existing demand, because that's how you unlock this massive new wave of customers. Let's see how this actually works with a really classic example. So let's talk about Callaway Golf. For years, the whole golf industry was totally obsessed with its existing base of serious golfers. But Callaway started asking a totally different, kind of radical question. Why are there so many people who love sports, but who are not playing golf? They literally looked right past their current market to all the people who were actively staying away. And you know what they found? A single powerful insight that united all of these non-golfers. It wasn't about their age or their income. It was about a shared frustration. For all of these potential players, hitting a tiny golf ball with a tiny club head was just too darn hard. It took forever to get good, and frankly, the fun was completely sucked out of it before they even got started. And that single insight led directly to their huge breakthrough, the Big Bertha Golf Club. With its giant, oversized head, it suddenly made hitting the ball way, way easier. And here's the real magic of this strategy. Not only did it turn a huge crowd of non-customers into brand new golfers, but the existing players loved it too. Turns out, they were also secretly frustrated by how hard the game was. They had just accepted it as, part of the game. This quote just nails the whole idea. It's a complete 180 from traditional strategy. You stop worrying about how to slice up the existing pie, and instead, you focus all your energy on baking a much, much bigger one. So that's the big idea. But how do you actually go out and find these non-customers? Well, the book gives us a fantastic framework for doing just that. It organizes all that hidden demand out there into 3 distinct tiers. Just take a look at this. Right in the middle, that's your current market. But all around it, you've got these 3 layers of untapped potential. See, non-customers aren't just one giant, faceless group. They exist at different distances from what your industry currently offers. Let's break them down real quick. Tier 1 are the soon-to-be non-customers. They're sitting right there on the edge of your market. Tier 2 are the refusing non-customers. These are people who've seen what you offer and have basically said, no thanks. And finally, Tier 3 are the unexplored. They are so far away that nobody in your industry has ever even thought of them as potential customers. All right, so let's put this framework into action. We're going to look at how a few different companies have specifically targeted each of these tiers to create their own blue oceans of uncontested market space. First up, Tier 1. Think of these people as your reluctant customers. They're using what your industry offers, but only barely, and usually out of necessity. They are actively, eagerly looking for something better and are ready to jump ship the second a better alternative comes along. A perfect example of this is Pret-a-Manger. Before Pret came along, busy professionals in big city centers had a real problem at lunchtime. A sit-down restaurant meal took too long or was too expensive for an everyday thing. So they were the classic soon-to-be non-customers of the restaurant industry. They were settling for bad options or just skipping lunch entirely. So what did Pret do? They didn't focus on what made these professionals different. They looked for what they all had in common. And it was simple. Across the board, they all wanted a lunch that was fast, was fresh and healthy, and was reasonably priced. By delivering on those 3 common needs with their high-quality, ready-to-go sandwiches, Pret unlocked a massive new market that was just waiting to be served.
Okay, on to tier 2. These are the refusers. They know all about your industry, they've looked at the options available, and they've made a very conscious and active choice to reject them completely. Think about the outdoor advertising world before a company called JCDecaux came along. A lot of companies flat out refused to buy billboard or bus ads. And why? Because they just saw them as a waste of money. The ads were gone in a flash, you couldn't put much information on them, and they were often in totally useless locations. JCDecaux had this absolutely brilliant insight. They realized the problem wasn't the ads themselves, it was the location and how long people saw them. So here's their solution. They went to cities and offered to provide and maintain all this street furniture, like bus shelters and public benches for free. And in exchange for that, they got the exclusive rights to put ads on them, right in prime downtown spots where people are just waiting around, giving those ads way more exposure. It was a total game changer. And finally, that brings us to tier 3, the most distant group of all. These are the unexplored non-customers. Their needs are typically assumed to belong to a completely different market. Honestly, no one in your industry is even thinking about these people. They're totally off the radar. Now, a really fascinating, huge-scale example of this is the Joint Strike Fighter Program, or JSF. For decades, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Marines were all treated as 3 totally separate markets for fighter jets. Each military branch had its own unique list of needs and built its own super expensive custom aircraft. In essence, they were unexplored non-customers to one another. This is where the JSF program just flipped the whole script. Instead of focusing on the hundreds of differences between what each branch wanted, they asked a simple question. What are the absolute non-negotiable must-have factors for each of you? And it turned out, as you can see highlighted here, there were only a few truly critical ones for each branch. By building a common platform that delivered on those critical needs, while sharing about 70% of its parts, they created a better aircraft for a much, much lower cost. So after looking at all 3 of these tiers, the big question becomes, where do you start? How do you find your own path to a blue ocean? And the answer, thankfully, is really practical. There's no single magic rule here. What you need to do is explore all 3 tiers of non-customers, and then focus on the one that represents the biggest opportunity that your organization actually has the ability to go after and convert. This quote really captures that final piece of advice perfectly. It's not just about finding the biggest opportunity out there. It's about your competence, your ability to actually seize it. You have to go find the biggest pond of non-customers that you can realistically fish in. So that leaves us with one last question to think about for your own world, your own industry. Who are the people on the edge? The people who are actively refusing you, and the people who have never, ever even been considered? And maybe most importantly, what is that one powerful common thread that could unite them and unlock them all?
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a framework for building a really solid business model, one that can help turn that brilliant idea you have into a real commercially viable success.
So why do so many brilliant ideas fail? I mean, it's a question that keeps innovators up at night, right? We've all seen it happen. Some groundbreaking product, this engineering marvel, it launches with all this hype and then just completely flops. So what's going on here?
Oh, a perfect example? The Philips CDI. They called it the imagination machine, promised it could do everything. Video, music, games, the whole shebang. But the reality, it was just so confusing to use, and there was no good software. So sales, well, they never even got off the ground. A total classic case of a solution desperately looking for a problem.
Okay, so to stop that from happening, we're going to dive into this really powerful framework from Blue Ocean Strategy. You should think of it like a 4-step gauntlet. Yeah, a gauntlet. It's a series of tests your idea has to pass to prove it can actually make it in the real world.
All right, let's jump into the first and, honestly, the most critical test in this whole thing, buyer utility. What does that even mean? Well, at its core, it's about asking one fundamental question. Is there a really compelling reason for a whole bunch of people to actually buy what you're selling?
You know, it's amazing how many companies fall right into what they call the technology trap. They just get obsessed with all the bells and whistles, right? The cool new tech, the impressive features, instead of just stepping back and asking a super simple question. Does this thing actually make a buyer's life dramatically better, or simpler, or more convenient?
So to avoid that trap, there's this really cool tool called the Buyer Utility Map. It basically forces you to break down the entire customer experience into 6 stages, everything from buying the thing all the way to getting rid of it.
And the whole point is to go through each of those stages and ask, okay, where are the biggest pain points? Where are the blocks to making things simple, convenient, or productive? That is where you find the real utility. And this slide just nails the difference, right? Look at Ford's Model T. It wasn't packed with crazy features. Nope. It was a utility machine. It solved real problems for tons of people. It was reliable, you could fix it yourself, and it could handle crummy roads. It gave people exactly what they needed, totally unlike the CDI, which just tried to be everything to everyone and ended up being nothing. Okay, so your idea has amazing utility. That's fantastic. But hey, that's just the first hurdle. Now we get to the second one, strategic pricing. And what this really means is you've got to price your idea for the masses, not just a handful of early adopters, and you have to do it right from day one.
The big insight here, the real key, is that you have to price your thing against what your buyers are using right now, even if those alternatives look completely different. I mean, think about it. Ford got this. He wasn't just competing with other automakers. No, his real competition was the horse and carriage. And when you realize that, it changes your entire pricing strategy.
Now this tool, the price corridor, is great for visualizing this. You see, first you map out all the different alternatives and what they cost. That gives you your price corridor. Then you have to decide where you're going to position your product. Is it super easy to copy? Well, then you probably need to price it lower to grab the market fast. But if you have some solid protections, patents, or whatever, you might be able to price it a bit higher.
And let's be real, in today's world, a great idea can get copied almost instantly. So this is more important than ever. If you price for the mass market right out of the gate, you build up volume fast, you get a strong reputation, and you basically create this big barrier that tells all those copycats, hey, don't even bother.
All right, so you've figured out your strategic price, the one that's going to attract the masses. Now, the logic completely flips on its head. You stop asking, okay, what's this going to cost us to make? And instead, you declare, this is what it has to cost.
Yeah, this is what's called price minus costing. It's the total opposite of the old cost-plus model. You start with the price the market will actually pay. Then you subtract the profit margin you need to stay in business, and whatever is left, that number is your target cost. It's non-negotiable. It's definitely a tough way to do it, but man, is it powerful.
Now, hitting a really aggressive target cost like that can seem impossible, I get it. But you're not powerless here. You've actually got 3 really powerful levers you can pull. First, you can streamline and innovate your operations. Think Henry Ford and the assembly line. Second, you can partner up with other companies to leverage their scale and what they're good at. And third, you can get creative and innovate the pricing model itself. Create a whole new way for people to buy. Kind of like what NetJets did with the whole timeshare thing for private jets.
So let's recap. You've got a product people need, at a price they'll pay, and a cost structure that actually makes you money. You're home free, right? Well, not quite. There's one last and very human hurdle you've got to clear, and that's adoption.
Think about it. Any truly new idea is going to threaten the way things are. It just is. Your own employees might fight the change. Your business partners could see it as a threat to their bottom line. And the general public, they might just be plain skeptical. You have to see these fears coming a mile away and deal with them head on, with open communication right from the beginning.
Okay, so you've put your idea through this whole 4-part gauntlet. How do you know if you've actually passed? How do you know if you're really ready to go to market?
Well, that's where the Blue Ocean Idea Index comes in. It's like a simple, final scorecard that shows you how your idea stacks up. And just look at this. The Philips CDI, it failed on every single count. A total disaster. But then you look at NTT Docomo's iMode, which was basically the world's first real mobile internet service. It got a clear plus across the board. And guess what? It was a massive, explosive success.
So you see, by systematically running your idea through this gauntlet, utility, price, cost, and adoption, you can get past just having a cool piece of tech and actually start building a business model that is built to last. So the only real question left to ask is your idea ready to run the gauntlet?
So how do you do it? How do you pull off a massive, game-changing transformation when literally everything is against you? You've got overwhelming odds, you have no money, and your team, well, they've already given up. It sounds completely impossible, right? Well, today, we're diving into something called tipping point leadership. It's this radical strategy for sparking huge change with moves that are, believe it or not, surprisingly small. And to really get our heads around this, we have to jump in a time machine and go back to New York City in the early 1990s. Now, to say the city was on the edge is putting it mildly. It was really on the verge of total anarchy. This was a place where fear was just part of the daily commute.
I mean, just look at these numbers. The stats were absolutely grim. Murders were at an all-time high. Muggings, robberies, they were just constant background noise. New Yorkers were basically living under siege. And the very people who were supposed to protect them, the 36,000 officers of the NYPD, they were completely demoralized. They were dealing with budget cuts, awful pay, and this overwhelming feeling that the city was just lost, ungovernable.
So this is the absolute mess that lands on the desk of the new police commissioner, Bill Bratton. And this brings us to the core question, the million-dollar question. How on earth do you turn around a failing organization of 36,000 people in a city that's spiraling into chaos when you have a frozen budget and a workforce that has lost all hope?
Well, Bratton realized pretty quickly that the criminals on the street weren't his only problem. Actually, they weren't even his biggest problem. The real enemy, the thing that was really holding everything back, was inside the organization itself. It came in the form of 4 hidden hurdles that stop any major change dead in its tracks. And here they are. First, you've got the cognitive hurdle. This is where your team is so stuck in the way things are, they can't even see the need for change. Then there's the resource hurdle. You know this one. The belief that you can't do anything big without a huge pile of cash. Third, the motivational hurdle. Your staff just isn't inspired. They have no reason to want to change. And finally, the political hurdle. You've got powerful people, inside and out, who will actively try to shut you down. So to get over these massive hurdles, Bratton didn't just follow the old playbook. No way. He used a totally radical approach that we now call tipping point leadership. And it completely, 100%, flips the script on how you make change happen. This slide really gets to the heart of it. Conventional wisdom, right? It tells you that to change a big group, you need a massive push. You have to move everybody all at once, and that's going to cost a fortune in time and money. But tipping point leadership, it just throws that idea out the window. It says, forget the masses. To create really fast change, you focus on the extremes, those few people and activities that have a huge outsized influence on everybody else. Think of it like this. Instead of trying to push a whole mountain, you just find the few key boulders at the edges. If you can move those, you create a ripple effect, an avalanche, really, that shifts the entire organization. And you do it fast and on the cheap. Okay, so that's the big idea. But how did Bratton actually pull it off? Let's open up his playbook and see exactly how he took down each of those 4 hurdles, one by one. All right, first up, the cognitive hurdle. This is the problem of waking people up. How do you convince an entire organization that's gotten comfortable, even in its own failure, that a massive change is desperately needed? Well, I'll tell you one thing. You don't do it with a PowerPoint presentation full of spreadsheets and data. You make them see it, feel it, for themselves. Bratton's strategy was brilliant and brutal. He forced his team to experience the worst of the city firsthand. At the time, the New York subway was so dangerous and disgusting it had a nickname. The electric sewer. And that's exactly where he sent his top commanders. You see, before Bratton, the top brass at the NYPD never actually rode the subways. They just looked at stats that said, oh, only 3% of major crimes happen there. But by forcing them to ride the electric sewer, they suddenly saw what regular citizens saw every single day: chaos, grime, fear. The numbers on a page became totally irrelevant. The reality was just undeniable. He did the same thing with town hall meetings, making his officers sit there and listen to angry, frustrated New Yorkers. There is nothing like direct experience to shatter denial. Okay, next up, the resource hurdle. Bratton's budget was completely frozen. Asking for more money was a total non-starter. Now, the conventional wisdom would be to scale back your ambitions, right? But a tipping point leader doesn't ask for more resources. They figure out how to multiply the value of the resources they already have. And this visual shows exactly how he did it. That dotted line, that's where the resources were going before him, spread way too thin across a ton of different activities. The solid line is his new strategy. See, he didn't spend more money, he just moved it. He cut resources way back from low-impact stuff and piled them onto the few things that really truly mattered. His process had 3 basic steps. First, he found the hotspots. These were the areas where just a little investment could get you huge results. For example, data showed most crime happened in just a few subway stations. So what did he do? He flooded those hotspots with officers. At the same time, he identified cold spots, activities that soaked up resources but had little impact. Get this. It used to take an officer 16 hours to process a single arrest. So we created buses, basically mobile processing centers, that cut that time down in just 1 hour. And finally, he engaged in horse trading. He would trade stuff he didn't need, like extra unmarked cars, with other city departments for things he did need, like more office space. Genius. So you've made people see the problem, and you've figured out how to use your resources. But how do you get them to actually do the hard work? This is the motivational hurdle. You can't just announce some grand vision and expect everyone to get on board. You do it by focusing your energy like a laser beam. Bratton's big idea was to zoom in on the organization's kingpins, its most important influencers, and then put them in a fishbowl where everything they did was completely visible to everyone. So instead of trying to motivate all 36,000 officers at once, can you imagine? He focused on just the 76 precinct commanders. These were the kingpins. You get them, and all the other dominoes fall. Then he created his fishbowl, a bi-weekly crime strategy meeting where every single one of those 76 commanders had to stand up and explain their precinct's performance in front of all their peers and bosses. Talk about pressure. Failure was public, but so was success. And finally, he atomized the goal. The mission wasn't some vague save New York. It was to make the city safe block by block, precinct by precinct. It made this huge, impossible-sounding goal feel real, tangible, and something that every single officer could actually contribute to. All right, we're at the final boss, the political hurdle. Even when you have the perfect strategy and a motivated team, you can bet there will be powerful people with their own interests who will try to sabotage you every step of the way. And to navigate this minefield, you have to be really clear on two things. You need to identify your angels, the people who stand to gain from your new strategy. And you need to know your devils, the ones who are going to lose something and will fight you tooth and nail. Bratton's first move here was to get himself a consigliere, like in The Godfather. A senior advisor, a respected insider who knew all the players and could warn him where the political traps were buried. Then he leveraged his angels. When the courts, a powerful devil, pushed back on his strategy, he built a massive coalition with his supporters, like the mayor and the press. They completely isolated the courts, making it politically impossible for them to resist. And that's how you win these battles. You build alliances so powerful that your enemies simply can't fight you. So, after overcoming these 4 huge hurdles, all with these really targeted, low-cost moves, what happened? Did it actually work? Let's look at the results. Okay, the numbers you see here are just staggering. In less than 2 years, and remember, with no budget increase, felony crime dropped by 39%. Murders were cut in half, a 50% drop. And theft went down by 35%. In just 2 years, New York City went from being America's most dangerous big city to its safest. But, it wasn't just about crime statistics. This right here shows the other, maybe even more important side of the story. Public confidence in the NYPD more than doubled. It jumped from a dismal 37% all the way up to 73%. He didn't just make the city safer, he actually restored people's trust. And this really brings us to the final, most important question. Bratton's incredible story shows us that to change the whole group, you don't need massive resources. You just need to focus on the extremes. So as you think about the changes you want to make in your company, in your community, even in your own life, ask yourself this. Who are your kingpins? What are your hotspots? Who are the extremes you need to transform to finally reach your tipping point? You know that feeling, right? You're part of a team with a brilliant new strategy, something that looks perfect on paper, but then it just completely fizzles out when it hits the real world. Well, today, we're going to dive into exactly why that happens so often, and we'll uncover a powerful secret that helps you build execution into your strategy right from the very beginning. It's a huge question, isn't it? Companies spend a fortune crafting what they think is the perfect plan, but the real roadblock? It's almost never the plan itself. It's getting the people on the front lines, the ones who have to make it happen, to actually buy in and run with it. It's that risk of distrust and non-cooperation that can sink even the smartest ideas. So to see how this plays out, let's look at this really strange case of a company we'll call Lubber. They're a global leader in industrial coolants, and they developed this incredible AI that should have made sales go through the roof. But instead, their own sales team, they actively worked against it. The question is, why? Just look at this. On paper, it was a total no-brainer. This AI system took out all the guesswork, and it slashed the failure rate for customers. For them, that meant less downtime, which is huge. And for lumber, it made the sales process way simpler, freeing up reps to go find new business. It was a perfect win-win. But it failed. And it failed for one simple reason: how the sales team felt. See, they were never involved in creating this new system, so they didn't see a helpful tool. They saw a threat. They felt like their most valuable skill, that expertise they built over years, was suddenly being made obsolete. So feeling left out and threatened, they just subtly killed the whole thing. The story of lumber really shines a light on the hidden key to making things happen. It's not about rewards or punishments. It's not about just pushing an idea from the top down. The secret is something called fair process. So what in the world is that? Okay, so this idea actually comes from legal studies, from something called procedural justice. Back in the 70s, researchers found something kind of mind-blowing. People's commitment to a decision is massively tied to whether they believe the process for getting there was fair. Turns out, how you do something is often just as important, if not more important, than what you do. And this quote just nails it. When people feel like there's a level playing field, they start to trust the intentions of leadership. And that trust, that's the magic ingredient. That's what inspires people to cooperate voluntarily, not because they have to, but because they want to. They feel like they're a real part of it. This chart shows that chain reaction perfectly. See, it all starts at the top with a fair process for coming up with a strategy. That directly leads to a positive attitude because people feel heard and respected, which builds trust. That trust then drives their behavior. They cooperate voluntarily. And the end result? You don't just meet your goals, you blow past them. So how do you actually create this fair process? Well, it really boils down to 3 core principles. The authors call them the 3 E's: engagement, explanation, and expectation clarity. Let's break them down. All right, first up is engagement. This is all about actively involving people in the decisions that are going to impact their work. You ask for their input, you let them challenge the prevailing wisdom, and this does 2 really important things. It shows you respect them as individuals, and frankly, you end up with a much smarter plan because you've tapped into the collective wisdom of the team. Next up is explanation. Now, this one is absolutely crucial. After a decision has been made, you have to explain the why. Why did we choose this path and not another? Because even if someone's idea wasn't the one that got picked, a clear explanation shows them that their input was valued and considered, and that the final decision was made for the good of the whole company. That builds an incredible amount of trust. And finally, we have expectation clarity. Once the new strategy is set, everyone, and I mean everyone, needs to know the new rules of the game. What are the new goals? Who's responsible for what? What does success look like now? When people have that clarity, they can pour all their energy into execution instead of wasting it on office politics or just trying to figure out what's going on. Now, here's the kicker. You can't just pick and choose. You absolutely need all 3 of these working together. Think about it. If you engage people but then never explain the final decision, they're just left feeling confused. If you explain a decision but never engage them in the first place, it just feels like a top-down order. You have to have all 3 for people to truly feel the process was fair. So let's see how this plays out in the real world with an incredible case study. It's about an elevator company we'll call Elko. This is a story of 2 different plants, 1 big strategy rollout, and 2 wildly different endings. So Elko needed to roll out a brand new, much more efficient manufacturing system. They decided to start at their Chester plant. This place was the golden child, a great workforce, no union issues. The plan was to perfect the system there and then roll it out to the High Park plant, which was known for having a pretty difficult union and being resistant to change. The logic seemed pretty solid, right? Well, what actually happened was the complete and total opposite of what they expected. The ideal Chester plant, it fell into chaos. We're talking rebellion, and performance just went into a nosedive. Meanwhile, the difficult High Park plant, they accepted the change and executed it willingly. The difference? One used fair process, and the other didn't. At Chester, management basically did everything wrong. They brought in outside consultants who worked in secret, which just fueled all these rumors about layoffs. There was 0 engagement. Then they unveiled the final plan in a quick 30-minute meeting with no real explanation of why it was necessary. And the new expectations? Totally vague. The result was predictable: fear, distrust, and people actively fighting the change. But over at High Park, it was a totally different story. Management held plant-wide meetings to engage everyone, laying out the tough business situation. They clearly explained why the shift was so critical for the company's survival. And get this, they actually worked with the employees to define the new performance goals. They created total clarity together. The result? Trust, support, and a home run execution. So the Elka story really shows us that fair process isn't just some fluffy, nice-to-have management style. It actually taps into something way deeper, something really fundamental about how we're all wired, and it creates one of the most valuable assets a company can possibly have. At its very core, what we're talking about here is recognition. Intellectually, people have a deep need to feel that their ideas are valued. And emotionally, they need to be treated with respect as actual human beings, not just cogs in a machine. Fair process, when done right, hits both of those needs.
And when you build that trust and commitment, you're building what the authors call intangible capital. Now, this isn't something you can see on a balance sheet, but it might be the most valuable thing you've got. It's the willingness of your team to go the extra mile, to share ideas freely, and to give it their all for the company's success.
This diagram really sums it all up. It shows the two paths a company can take. Follow that top path, and you see fair process leads to that intellectual and emotional recognition we talked about. That builds trust, which leads to voluntary cooperation. But follow that bottom path, where fair process gets ignored, and do get outrage, and that breeds distrust, people hoarding their knowledge, and at the end of the day, sabotage. So, I'll leave you with this final thought. Think of the trust inside your organization like a bank account. Every single time you use fair process, you engage people, you explain the why, and you create clarity, you're making a deposit. And every time you violate it, you're making a withdrawal. So the question to ask yourself is your organization's trust account full, or is it running on empty?
You know, we've all seen it happen. A brilliant idea, a fantastic product, and then, poof, it just fizzles out. Well, the secret to making something last isn't just about having a great idea. It's about something much deeper, something called alignment. Today, we're diving into the alignment principle from Blue Ocean Strategy, which is really the key to building something that can truly go the distance.
I mean, think about it. It's a story you see over and over again, right? Some groundbreaking new thing launches, there's all this buzz, and then a year or two later, it's just a memory. So what's going on here? What's the missing piece of the puzzle? Why do so many of these amazing innovations just fail?
Because here is the absolute truth of it. A brilliant idea all by itself is basically worthless. Real, sustainable success only happens when every single part of your strategy clicks together, perfectly in sync. If you don't have that total alignment, even the most revolutionary product is pretty much doomed from day one.
Okay, so how do we actually build this perfectly aligned strategy? Well, it all comes down to a really simple but incredibly powerful framework, the 3 essential propositions. Let's break down what they are.
The best way to picture this in your head is to think of a simple 3-legged stool. Now, you could have 2 of those legs made from the strongest steel in the world, but if that third leg is just a little bit cracked or weak, the whole thing is going to come crashing down. Your strategy is exactly like that stool. So let's take a look at the 3 legs that have to hold it up.
So, leg number 1 is the value proposition. This is what you're offering your customers. It's that compelling reason that makes them choose you. It's all about the amazing utility they get, weighed against the price they have to pay. When you nail this, the buyer feels like they've just found an absolutely unbeatable deal.
All right, leg number 2 is the profit proposition. This is your business model. I mean, it's great to have an amazing offer for your customers, but can you actually deliver it and stay in business? This is all about how you make your money and, maybe even more importantly, how you structure your costs to make sure you're profitable for the long haul.
And then we have the third leg. And honestly, this is the one so many people forget, the people proposition. And listen, this is not just about your employees. It's about your partners, your suppliers, your entire ecosystem. If all of those people aren't genuinely motivated and incentivized to help you succeed, well, the best strategy in the world is completely dead in the water.
Now, here's where the real magic of blue ocean thinking comes in. In a traditional competitive space, what we call a red ocean, you're always forced to make a trade-off. You can either be different and special, which usually costs more, or you compete on being the cheapest. But what Blue Ocean Strategy says is that by powerfully aligning these 3 propositions, you don't have to choose. You can actually achieve both differentiation and low cost at the same time, and that is a total game changer.
So what does this perfect alignment actually look like in the real world? Well, for a masterclass in this, let's turn to the UK charity Comic Relief. They jumped into a really crowded, kind of depressing industry and just completely rewrote the rules by nailing these three propositions. Before comic relief came along, the standard playbook for charities was all about guilt and pity, right? You'd see these somber ads trying to make you feel bad so you donate. Comic relief just flipped that entire idea on its head. Their core concept? Funny for money. They made giving an act of joy, not a heavy obligation.
And the result of that shift? Whoa, over £950 million raised. This wasn't just some lucky gimmick. This was the direct result of a perfectly aligned strategy where every single part was working together.
So let's look at their three-legged stool, starting with the value proposition they offered to donors. First, they gave you fun instead of guilt with Red Nose Day. They made it super easy and cheap to join in. Anyone can afford a £1 red nose. And they backed it all up with their incredible Golden Pound promise, guaranteeing that 100% of the money you donate goes straight to the projects. Now, you're probably wondering how on earth could they afford a promise like that? Well, that is the genius of their profit proposition. They built an ultra-low-cost model by just getting rid of all the typical charity expenses. No fancy fundraising dinners, no expensive retail stores. Instead, they tapped into this massive army of volunteers and created so much buzz that they got millions in free media coverage, which completely eliminated their ad budget.
And this all comes back to that crucial third leg, the people proposition. I mean, think about it. With comic relief, everybody wins. The volunteers get to have a blast and feel like they're part of something huge. Celebrities and corporate partners get amazing positive PR. The result is that comic relief doesn't have to go around begging for help. People are practically lining up to get involved. That right there is the power of a great people proposition.
Okay, but what happens when one of those legs is wobbly? To really see the consequences of misalignment, let's look at a pretty famous cautionary tale.
Do you remember the Tata Nano? When it was first announced, it was celebrated as this revolutionary people's car. It got more media hype than almost any car in history, and it racked up over 200,000 pre-orders in just a couple of weeks. By all accounts, it looked like a guaranteed, industry-changing smash hit.
And yet, despite all that incredible momentum, the Nano just never lived up to the hype. It fell so dramatically short of its sales targets, so what on earth went wrong?
Well, this table tells the entire story. See, Tata absolutely nailed two legs of the stool. They had a fantastic value proposition, a safe family car for the price of a scooter. And they had a brilliant profit proposition, built on some truly radical cost innovations. But that third leg, the people proposition, it was completely shattered. They failed to create a compelling win for the local community where the factory was supposed to be built, and that led to massive protests. That one single failure created delays that just crippled the entire launch.
And you see this exact same pattern play out with digital music. Napster had an incredible value proposition for users. Free music, who wouldn't want that? But its people proposition for a key partner, the record labels, wasn't just bad, it was hostile. So of course, they got sued into oblivion. Then along comes Apple. They designed iTunes with a great deal for users and a compelling proposition for the labels by giving them a slice of the revenue. That alignment is exactly why iTunes won.
So how can you avoid the fate of the Tata Nano and actually build something that lasts, like comic relief? Well, it all comes down to running a pretty simple alignment check on your own strategy or idea.
So you can run this quick diagnostic on your own idea. First, just ask yourself, are my value, profit, and people propositions all pulling in the same direction towards being both different and low cost? Second, who are all the stakeholders I really depend on? And think beyond just customers and employees. I'm talking suppliers, partners, regulators. And third, and this is the most critical question, what is the compelling win for every single one of those groups that makes them want to get on board with me? Because in the end, this idea of alignment is the fundamental difference between something that's just a flash in the pan and an organization that truly endures. So it's worth asking yourself, is what I'm building just a clever idea, or is it a fully supported three-legged stool, truly built to last?
So you did it. You actually pulled it off. You followed the playbook, you broke away from the pack, and now you're sailing in a beautiful blue ocean of uncontested market space. The profits are rolling in, growth is off the charts, it's amazing. But what happens when everyone else on the scene notices your success? Well, that's the big challenge we're going to tackle in this explainer. This is the crucial question, isn't it? The one every successful innovator eventually has to ask. Because creating that blue ocean, well, that's not the end of the story. It's really just the beginning of a whole new strategic game. Because when you create something that works, you can bet on one thing for sure. And there they are. That's the core problem, right? Your peaceful, profitable blue ocean is about to get a whole lot more crowded. Competitors, drawn in by the smell of your success, are going to start sailing right into your waters. And they threaten to turn your brilliant blue ocean into a bloody red one, filled with sharks all fighting for the same piece of the pie. Yeah, this isn't a maybe, it's a total inevitability. So the real questions are, how much time do you have before they catch up, and what can you do to prepare for it? This right here is the key thing to remember. You can't just create a blue ocean, plant your flag, and then, drop anchor for good. It's a cycle. It's a process. You have to be ready to innovate, to defend, and, when the time is right, to sail off and find new waters all over again. Now for the good news. A really well-executed blue ocean strategy, it doesn't just create a new market. It also builds its own defenses from day one. You can think of it like a fortress, designed to keep all those would-be pirates at bay, at least for a while. And these barriers, they are no joke. They can protect your blue ocean for a surprisingly long time. I mean, take Cirque du Soleil. They enjoyed their uncontested space for more than 20 years. These aren't just little hurdles. They're deep, strategic moats that are really hard for anyone to cross. Okay, so what are these powerful barriers? Well, they tend to fall into 4 main categories. You've got the alignment barrier. That's where your whole business, from your value prop to your people, is so uniquely built, it's just incredibly hard to copy. Then there are cognitive and organizational barriers, the brand barrier, and of course, the economic and legal barriers. What's so fascinating is how these all work together. Let's take that cognitive barrier. It basically means your new idea just doesn't compute for your competitors. When CNN launched 24/7 News, the big networks literally laughed. They called it chicken noodle news. Ridicule doesn't exactly light a fire under people to copy you, right? So you combine that with brand loyalty and the sheer scale of the operation, and you've got yourself a seriously powerful defense. But let's be real, no fortress holds out forever. The best sailors always know when the tides are turning and it's time to chart a new course. The big question is, how do you spot the signs before it's too late? This is the million-dollar question. Actually, it's probably the billion-dollar question. If you move too soon, you're leaving a ton of profit on the table. But if you wait too long, you're trapped in a red ocean, fighting just to survive. Timing is absolutely everything. The key is to watch your strategy visually using a tool called a strategy canvas. Just think of it like a graph where you plot what you offer versus what everyone else offers. The line you draw is your value curve. When you first launch, your curve looks totally different from everyone else's. But when you start to see competitors' curves looking more and more like yours, that's your signal. The ocean is starting to change color. So what are the specific warning flares to look out for? Well, your value curve starts to lose its sharp focus. The things that made you different are being copied. Your tagline, which used to be so unique, now sounds kind of generic. This is precisely what happened to The Body Shop. They created an amazing blue ocean, but they didn't value innovate again. Competitors caught up, and they ended up stuck in a very bloody Red Sea. So who actually got this right? Let's look at a company that has absolutely mastered this art of renewal, Salesforce.com. See, Salesforce didn't just create one blue ocean and call it a day. They launched a whole fleet. First, they totally invented the on-demand CRM market. Then, as competitors started pouring in, they didn't just try to compete harder. Nope. They value innovated again, launching Force.com and the App Exchange. And then, when the pack started to catch up again, bam, they launched Chatter. They just kept redefining the market, always staying one step ahead. So how does this work on a bigger scale for a company that's managing a ton of different products? Well, for a masterclass in that, you gotta look at Apple's portfolio. To manage a whole portfolio of businesses, you can use something called the Pioneer Migrator Settler Map. Now, the names might sound a bit technical, but the idea is super simple. Pioneers are your blue ocean creators, the game changers. Settlers are your Me Too businesses stuck in red oceans, and migrators are somewhere in between. They offer improvements, but they're not radical breakthroughs. For healthy growth, you need a good balance of all three. And just look at this map of Apple's portfolio. It's fascinating. It shows a company that is constantly, deliberately launching new pioneers. As one product, like the Macintosh, starts to become a migrator, a new pioneer, like the iPod, is already on its way. This isn't just luck. It's a calculated, corporate-wide strategy to guarantee future growth.
I mean, the iPod's life cycle is the perfect example. It was a true pioneer. It completely changed the game. But as competitors flooded the market, it slowly shifted into migrator territory. And just as that was happening, what did Apple do? They launched their next pioneer, the iPhone, creating a brand new, even bigger blue ocean. They literally made their own blockbuster product obsolete with the next one. That's how you stay ahead.
So you might be thinking, okay, got it. Red oceans are bad, blue oceans are good. But hold on, the reality is actually a bit more nuanced than that. It really is all about balance. Apple succeeds because it competes like crazy in red oceans with its existing products, while at the same time, it's funding the new pioneers of the future. Now, contrast that with Microsoft during the same period. They became so dependent on their settler businesses, Windows and Office, and without new blue oceans to drive that next wave of growth, the result was more than a decade of stagnation. So here's the ultimate takeaway. Long-term, sustainable success isn't about choosing one ocean over the other. It's about mastering the strategies for both. You have to know how to compete effectively in the tough red oceans of today, while you're systematically creating the blue oceans of tomorrow. And that, right there, is the ultimate question to leave you with. It's not just about knowing where your business is on the map right now, whether you're a pioneer, a migrator, or a settler. It's about having a clear chart for where you're headed next to make sure you don't just survive, but you continue to thrive. All right, let's talk about one of the most powerful ideas in business strategy out there, blue ocean strategy. You know, it's this amazing concept that basically says, hey, why are we all fighting over the same little scraps when we could create a whole new world of opportunity for ourselves? So let me ask you something right off the bat. Does your business life ever feel like you're just swimming in a bloody red ocean? I mean, a constant, brutal fight for every little piece of market share. The water's all churned up, red with the blood of your rivals, and everyone's fighting tooth and nail for the exact same customers. Yeah, that's a red ocean.
And this really breaks down the difference perfectly. So on one side, you've got the red oceans. This is the market space we all know. The game here, it's all about beating the competition. It's a zero-sum game. For you to win, someone else has to lose. But then you look at the other side, the blue oceans. Man, this is a totally different ballpark. This is about creating brand new, uncontested market space. The result? You make the competition completely irrelevant. It becomes a non-zero-sum game because you're creating and capturing demand that didn't even exist before. I mean, that sounds amazing, right? Create your own market, make competition irrelevant. Sign me up. So the big question is, if it's so powerful, why isn't everyone doing it? Why are so many businesses just stuck, swimming around in that same bloody water? Well, the answer is actually kind of simple, but it's also really profound. It all comes down to this. Our minds are trapped. We are anchored by these hidden assumptions. The creators of the strategy call them red ocean traps. And these traps keep us laser focused on the competition, even when we think we're trying to be innovative. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're going to do some serious myth busting. We're going to dive in, identify these traps, and just completely break down the common myths that keep so many businesses stuck. Okay, let's start with the big one, the absolute biggest myth of them all, the idea that strategy is all about competing to win. You know the drill. We're taught from day one that you have to be first, you have to be better, you have to have the most advanced tech. But is that really true? Yeah, this is the conventional wisdom trap in a nutshell. It's this voice in your head that says to win, you must have the newest technology, you must be the first one to market. Or you just have to focus on making your existing customers a little bit happier. And that kind of thinking, it keeps you chained right there in the red ocean. And this quote just completely blows that myth out of the water. Just think about Apple for a second. One of the most valuable companies on the planet. The iMac wasn't the first PC. The iPod? Nope, not the first MP3 player. And the iPhone, it certainly wasn't the first smartphone. See, Apple was rarely first, but they were almost always the first to get it right. And this brings us to the absolute cornerstone of blue ocean strategy. It's a concept called value innovation. This is the secret sauce. It's not about inventing new tech just for the sake of it. No, it's all about making a huge leap in value for your buyers by linking those new ideas to what people actually care about. You know, making things simpler, easier, more fun, not just more complicated. Okay, so this leads us right into the next big trap. For decades, business schools have been hammering this idea into our heads, the great trade-off.
You have two choices. You can either differentiate, provide some premium value at a higher cost, or you can be the low-cost leader. You have to choose one. Pick a lane. But Blue Ocean's strategy just looks at that and asks, why do I have to choose? The real magic, the breakthrough moment, is what you could call the and strategy. It's about going after differentiation and low cost at the same time. How is that even possible? Well, you do it by getting really smart about what you eliminate, the stuff your industry has been competing on for years that customers don't really care about, and then creating totally new kinds of value they've never seen. And when you pull this off, the result is this incredible win-win. Buyers get a massive leap in value. They're thrilled. And the company, because you've smartly engineered your costs by cutting out all that old, unnecessary junk, you get a massive leap in profit and growth. It's just beautiful. So what's the upshot of all this? When you actually break that value-cost trade-off, you're not just playing the old game better. You're not. You are creating an entirely new game, a game where the old rules, the old competitors, they just don't matter anymore. They're irrelevant. And listen, I want to be super clear about this. This isn't just some lofty, abstract theory from a textbook. Not at all. This is a real, repeatable pattern. You can look back all throughout business history and you see this pattern of blue ocean creation pop up again and again and again. I mean, look at the U.S. auto industry. In 1908, Henry Ford didn't try to build a slightly better luxury car for the rich. He created the Model T, a car for the great multitude. Then, a bit later, GM didn't just make a cheaper Ford. They added style, color, emotion. Fast forward to the 70s, and Japanese imports didn't try to outmuscle American cars. They offered small, fuel-efficient cars that were super reliable. And then bam, 1984. Chrysler doesn't just make a better station wagon, they invent the minivan and create a whole new category for families. Every single one of those was a blue ocean move. Here's another perfect example. Let's talk about the first personal computer versus the first valuable PC. On one hand, you had the Altair 8800 in 1974. Yeah, it was technically the first one, but it was for serious hobbyists. I mean, you had to program it with switches, no keyboard, no monitor. But then just a few years later came the Apple II. This was for everyone. It was an all-in-one design, it was easy to use, and crucially, it came with useful software like VisiCalc. That's the difference between a technology innovation and a value innovation. And if you want to see how powerful those red ocean traps are, just look at this quote. In 1977, the president of Digital Equipment Corp., a huge computer company at the time, said there is no reason for any individual to have a computer in their home. He couldn't see it. He was completely trapped by the existing definition of what a computer was and who it was for. Wow. Okay, so this is all great, but how do you actually apply this stuff? How do you start finding your own blue ocean? Well, it all starts with a really fundamental, conscious shift in how you think about strategy itself. And this is that shift right here. It's a move from competing in existing markets to creating brand new market space. It's a shift from focusing on beating the competition to making the competition totally irrelevant. And it's moving from just exploiting the demand you already have to creating and capturing a whole new world of demand. That's the mindset. And this right here is so, so important. Please get this. The journey to a blue ocean, it doesn't start with the question, how can we solve our industry's current problem just a little bit better, or maybe a little bit cheaper than everybody else? That's not the starting point.
No, it's about redefining the problem itself.
And that's really the big idea I want to leave you with today. I want you to look at your industry, your job, your projects, and ask yourself, what is the fundamental problem that everyone is trying to solve? And then, what would happen if, instead of just solving that problem a little better, you completely redefined it? What if you asked what you could eliminate and what amazing new value you could create? Because the answer to that question, well, that just might be your blue ocean.